Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our panel, Supporting Student Mental Health and Wellness in the Fall, update from Northern Virginia school leaders. My name is Megan Souza. I'm a program coordinator at NAMI Northern Virginia and co-chair of the Northern Virginia Family Network. We're really excited to have a great group of panelists here tonight to answer. We got many questions in from family members. We know it's a difficult time with students heading back into school after a year and a half of a pandemic. So really excited to have these panelists that dedicated their time to come and share information with you and connect with you. So before we go into the panel, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules. This panel is being recorded. You can view it later at the same link here on YouTube. It'll be available starting tomorrow. So if you miss anything, if you have to leave early, you can come back and watch the rest of the panel. The chat box has been disabled, so we're not taking any questions live through the chat. If you do have a question during the live session that you really want to get in, you can send an email to our Northern Virginia Family Network email. It's on the screen there, nvfnetwork@gmail.com. We will keep an eye on it. I will say we received many questions, and it is very unlikely that we're going to get to all of them today. Unfortunately, we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can. Again, if we get in questions live, we might not get to them, but you feel free to send them to us. If you do have an unanswered question at the end, feel free to send us an email and we can try to connect with our panelists to see if they can provide an answer later on. But we're going to do our best to get as many as we can today. And I'm going to pass it over to Kelly.
Good evening, and I will join in with Megan in welcoming you all to tonight's panel. And a huge thank you to our panelists from our local school divisions who will introduce themselves shortly. I wanted to just talk briefly about the Northern Virginia Family Network. Our mission is to elevate the voice of families in order to improve outcomes for children, youth, and young adults across our systems of care. We are an informal group. If you Googled us, you didn't probably find a website yet, but we are all nonprofit peer family organizations that serve Northern Virginia families and children. We meet quarterly. It's an informal network, but we have come together for the last several years and produced a number of fact sheets. I believe if you registered, Megan sent you and attached a couple of those fact sheets. There are one-pagers that we hope you either as a professional or a family member are able to use in your work to support children and families. And we are thrilled to be able to offer this panel. Again, those fact sheets are listed there and you will have them attached in the email, but if you didn't receive that email or would like them, again, you can email us at nvfnetwork@gmail.com or go to one of our websites and you can find those fact sheets there as well. We are specifically made up of a number of organizations, of peer family organizations, as I said, and here is a list of our member organizations: the ARC of Northern Virginia, the Autism Society of Northern Virginia, CHAD of Northern Virginia and DC, Down Syndrome Association of Northern Virginia, Forum Families Forward, where I'm the director. We serve foster, adoptive, and kinship families. NAMI Northern Virginia, Megan is my co-chair in this effort. Parents of Autistic Children of Northern Virginia, or POAC. The Parent Education Advocacy and Training Center, or PETC. The Regratifying Foundation, who works with foster youth as they transition into adulthood. The Fairfax County Special Education PTA, or SEPTA, and the Ryan Bartell Foundation. So all of us are members of this organization, of our network, and we're thrilled to welcome you. If you want to know more about any of our member organizations, again, you can reach out through that email and we'll connect you with the right folks. Whoops. And on to our panelists, the most important part of the evening. We are thrilled to welcome 6 of our students services and special services and school psychology and social work leaders throughout the region. They are going to take about 3 minutes each and introduce themselves and give a bit of update, an overview about the school plans for this coming return to school, which is coming up very quickly. And I believe Alexandria actually has one of their schools already back in session. So we're at a perfect time to reach out to families. And again, if you need to email any of us and contact us right now, nvfnetwork@gmail.com, rather than using the chat, which has been disabled in our YouTube feature. So welcome, and I'm going to just start alphabetically with our school systems, and that's Wendy Caria from Arlington Public Schools. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be invited and included in this conversation, and I'm very excited. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am, my role. I'm Wendy Caria, and I'm the supervisor for school psychology and social work in Arlington Public Schools in the Office of Student Services. And we are really looking forward to starting the school year this year in person, 5 days a week, full time. I am as stressful as all the changes are and all the tech lift and all of the things that we have to do we are so excited to see the kids. And so we're looking forward to it. We've been working very diligently on our plans. In fact, I came straight here from a town hall meeting this evening, which is continuing to talk about all the details of that and to receive parent concerns and questions. In Arlington, we are simultaneously expanding, not rolling out, but expanding our SEL efforts, which have been actually underway for the past couple of years. And we're working on more integration within the content areas and things like that, because we know that, as not my original quote, but one that we've embraced, is that SEL is not something else on the plate, it is the plate. So we're really ramping up to do that work this year in alignment with the recent BDOE announcements. And so I could go on, but I'll wait and let everybody introduce themselves, and then look forward to more conversation as we go forward this evening.
Great. And next up is Bethany from Fairfax County Public Schools.
Hi, I'm also so pleased to be here tonight. Thank you for having me. I am Bethany Demers. I'm the mental wellness specialist for Fairfax County Public Schools. And similar to what Wendy shared, we are expanding our SEL efforts this year. A major focus as we return to school 5 days in person is building relationships. So through morning meeting at the elementary level and advisory, which is a class period built into the school day for all secondary students, we are really pushing that focus on building, practicing the CASEL 3 signature practices. So welcoming and inclusion, engaging strategies, and then optimistic closure throughout the school day in every class. We'll also be doing a SEL screener, universal screener at some pilot schools this year that will eventually roll out to all of our schools. And then we will be doing a depression screening for all 7th, 9th, and 11th graders. For our students in other grade levels, they will still receive psychoeducation related to observing wellness concerns in themselves or others, and what to do to get help. And so we have other programming in place for some of those other grade levels as well. We offer, for students in need, we offer group counseling and individual counseling based in evidence-based programming. And there are a variety of different resources related to that. So now I've talked too long, so we'll turn it over to our next guest.
Thank you. And I realized I made a mistake. It's not alphabetical by division, but rather by the last names of our presenters. So sorry, Daryl, got you all excited that you were going to be first with Alexandria, but we have Jennifer Evans next with Loudoun County.
Hi, everybody. And I just want to echo what Bethany and Wendy said about just how excited we are to get back in person 5 days a week and see those kids. And we have had very similar growth and expansion with our services. We've had our unified mental health teams in place for many years now. Now we're expanding to the elementary schools to really define what that will look like. Our SEL is now in 58 elementary schools, so all of our elementary schools K through 5. And then at our middle schools, we have 13 middle schools taking that on, as well as virtual Alvin. And we are really just trying to provide outreach right now. So a lot of our 10-month, 11-month staff have been working throughout the summer, identifying students who might need some additional supports and reaching out to those families. So looking at some of those data indicators with attendance or mental health, whether they've received services before. But we are also doing a screening. So we're sending out a screening to all students to their Chromebooks with 2 questions, asking how they're feeling about coming back and whether they want to check in with someone. So we just want to make sure that we provide that outreach to all. But with the Senate bill and the additional positions, we're really enhancing our mental health and substance abuse prevention and our restorative practices implementation. So we have also rolled out a first 30 days of community building framework for all administrators, which looks at how are you aligning RTI, response to intervention, PBIS, SEL, and our equity work. So it gives specific tasks that each administrator can do, and it rolls it down to teachers. So what would that look like the first week of school, the second week of school? So again, very similar to what's happening in Fairfax and Arlington, but really excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Thank you, Jen. All right, Daryl from Alexandria City Schools.
Now I'm up. Excellent. So Daryl Sampson from Alexandria City Public Schools. So we are looking to use our multi-tiered systems of support framework to really lay the foundation for us in terms of how we're going to support our students across the board. So we are first planning to again do a universal screening of our students in grades 3 through 12. We did this last year. We used the UCLA COVID brief screening tool. It really helps to identify the students who may have been experiencing some known symptoms or signs of traumatic experiences. And really it's tailored specifically to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're hoping to use that information early on, like we did last year in the fall as well, to be able to identify areas that we need to enhance within our Tier 1 social, emotional, and academic learning curriculum, but B, to then be able to identify those students who might need more targeted interventions. So then through that MTSS process, we're really able to identify kids that might need more support. So we use evidence-based and research-based interventions such as Bounce Back and SSET that are very specific to trauma. We'll also be looking to implement some check-in, check-out opportunities for kids because of our struggles with attendance, as well as some other, curricula for students. I think it's also important for us because we want to acknowledge the amount of loss that our students and, quite frankly, staff have experienced over the last year. So we're also looking to provide our student support team members, our school counselors, school nurses, school psychologists, and school social workers with resources about how to address student grief, potentially in group format. Because we want to make sure that those kids who really do need that additional support with loss are able to get that. And then we last year, and we're continuing with it this year, implemented daily 30 minutes of what we call social, emotional, and academic learning. We don't think you can separate academic and the social emotional. They really are intertwined when we look holistically at our students. So we are going into a full district implementation of the ruler curriculum from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Next year, we have had 8 schools over the last 2 years, and we're going to just finish up with that group this year. But then we also enhance that with our own materials that are tailored to support our schools, looking at our PBIS programming to start and really set those expectations and routines with students at the very beginning. And I can talk more about that with some of the questions that we'll answer. But then how we're also building community and a sense of belonging and giving students a voice in their classrooms or their classes in their schools through that use of community circle formats through restorative practices.
Thank you, Daryl. Next up is Prince William County Schools and Becca.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Hi, my name is Becca Schlater. I am the Director of Student Services for Prince William County Schools. Great to be here this evening. Talking to parents is one of my favorite things. I do love working with parent groups, and I'm just thankful that there's this much interest in talking about starting the school year. We too in Prince William County Schools are very excited to welcome back all of our students 5 days a week. We're ready for them to hit the ground and get ready to learn, but we know we have to address some things. So in Prince William County Schools, we're getting ready for the school year by implementing our Launching Thriving Futures initiative. So this is our plan to address unfinished learning and really try to analyze the barriers to new learning. So we will be doing mental health screenings, division-wide emotional check-ins right at the start of the school year, like many of my colleagues on here have talked about. I think that all of us have learned that there's a great value in checking in and seeing how we can support and really tailor an individual plan for each student. We also do mental health depression screenings at grade 7, 9, and 10. And we also do a parent needs assessment survey where we ask parents to share information with us about support that their student may need. The parents on here may be surprised to hear this, but sometimes parents see things differently than their students see them. And so we like to hear from our parents as well. And so this year we'll have that information, be able to match it together with the student information. The other thing that we're focused on in Prince William County Schools as we head back and we're launching Thriving Futures is really focus on wellness and not just wellness for students, but wellness for our teachers and our staff members. So we are entering into some initial steps into healing-centered engagement to really focus on how can we make ourselves as well as possible as adults so that we can make the students well. So in many of our schools in Prince William County, our students and our parents will hear this theme of wellness and will see very tangible outcomes as to how we're trying to take care of each other and model that for students and taking care of themselves. The other thing that I want the parents to know is that we are paying very special attention to our students who ended the school year virtually. So we did have some students that came back. It was a small percent of students, but we really recognize that there's a lot happening for a child who is walking in the door after being out of a school for almost a year and a half. So we're really looking at the data for those students and trying to address and reach out to those families as well. So, you know, in Prince William County, much like my colleagues in Northern Virginia, I think that you're going to see really a lot of extra support and different things than you've seen in the past, attention paid to that social emotional learning in our classrooms, working with teachers to address what's happening now and, you know, really trying to level the playing field for our teachers and providing them with lessons for the first week of school and activities that they can do with students so that we can address what's happening and really move forward and get to learning. So thank you so much for having me today. And I look forward to answering some of the other questions.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And Rebecca from Falls Church City Public Schools, welcome. Rebecca, do you want to share a little bit?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm much smaller. Our school division is much smaller than our friends around the screen. So I think our approaches are because we are so small, I think our approaches are a little more intimate probably than my friends in larger school divisions. And we are very excited because we are starting back on August 30th, 5 days a week across all of our schools for all of our students. And I think that's really our first big step in, you know, supporting the mental health for our families is I don't know that we'll ever achieve normal again, but we are approaching, you know, the more routines that we can add back, the more consistency that we can provide to families and to children, I think that gets us a step closer to normalcy. And that really is our first layer. We are also in International Baccalaureate School Division. So built into the IB program are the approaches to learning, which really are grounded in those really foundational social skills and, those self-regulation skills and all of those critical SEL pieces are a part of the Abby program that we implement. And so we've really spent a lot of time this summer getting ready for school to open. We've had teams of teachers working on lessons aligned to the ATLs to really kind of help with the SEL core for all of our students. And then we also have taken the MTSS approach as well for students that we identify with more mild to moderate needs, as well as children with intensive needs. We've been very fortunate this year that we were able to bring in Healthy Minds Fairfax so that we're able to get access, more immediate access to counseling for our students who really are in that more mild range so that we can get preventative services in place before they move into the more intensive pieces. I do have an amazing student services team, our school psychologists, our social workers, all of our counselors in our buildings. And we are very fortunate that we also have BCBAs who are with us to help our students really work on those self-regulation skills and those executive functioning skills, all those things that they're going to need. Our big philosophy is we are looking at this as a traumatic event. And so we're doing a lot of trauma-informed care training and approaches to our return to school. And we're supporting our teachers as well. That, it is a big concern, about the mental health of our teachers, because, we're also working on that theory of you need to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can do it for anyone else. So I am excited to answer questions and be here tonight and share what we're doing in Falls Church.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you all. As I mentioned, we have a lot of questions, so we're going to dive in. Just a reminder to attendees, if you have any comments or pressing questions, you can email nvfnetwork@gmail.com and we'll do our best to get to them. So a lot of you mentioned social emotional learning, and we actually had a few questions come in from families about social emotional learning. One parent in particular noted that last year students watched videos on SEL or social emotional learning at least once a week. However, for those kids who are struggling with loss of family members because of COVID or displacement from their homes, how do teachers talk about these issues in a safe space? I'm going to turn to Jen first to start off.
Thank you. And that is a very good question. And I do want to point out that, at least in Loudoun, the SEL components were daily. So we had our morning meetings, and I know many of the neighboring districts did as well. So I think videos might have been once a week, but those morning meetings and advisory lessons should have been every morning. But one of the other things that I want to make clear is that teachers should be aware of those concerns, and they're going to be the first point of contact for students and parents when something has happened where students experienced a loss or some sort of traumatic event. But they don't have the skill set, nor should they be talking to students in depth about that. They should be referring to their unified mental health team staff, whoever that might be in their school, because teachers can't take on anymore. I mean, let's be honest, they've been very overwhelmed and they've had a lot on their plates adapting all of that, but they've done the last 19 months. So they have skilled professionals in the building who they should be referring to, who have the evidence-based curriculum, who have that skill set to help students process whatever it is that they're feeling. So those are just 2 points that I wanted to make.
Thanks. Becca, would you like to add?
I would just echo what Jen said. It's really important that our teachers create an environment where children feel comfortable in sharing how they feel comfortable in sharing, what's going on at home, but to also recognize that that's not their role. Their role is to notify the staff in the building who are trained. And we have clinical staff on our team in each of our buildings, and those are the folks that have the skill sets for that.
Schlatter, you can feel free to jump in as well.
Great. Yeah, you got two. You have a Becca and a Rebecca here. I just wanted to say one other thing that I would add to that is certainly I echo what Jen said about, teachers being aware of those situations and when they need to refer to the school-based mental health professionals. I can say that I know in Prince William County, and I know many of our surrounding school divisions have done this. We've invested both time and fiscal resources into training teachers on how to spot problems, how to spot changes in behavior, how to address a student when they see a change in behavior, and how to get that student the help that they need. So I think that many of us have seen that this is a need. We know that the children are really comfortable with the teachers, and we love that. The relationship forming that happens between a teacher and a student is like no other. We want those teachers to know what to do and where to turn in those situations so that the student feels safe in coming to the teacher at future times, and they can refer the student to the appropriate person.
Thank you.
Right. And I would just add that I think a big piece of it is making sure that at that start of the year, but throughout, with that daily opportunity, teachers are able to work with their students collaboratively to create a space that is as safe and where there is trust. And when we're adding specifically that social emotional component, we're providing them with vocabulary and understanding of how to communicate what those thoughts, feelings, and understandings might be around where that student is. And then, yes, making sure that we've provided them, and I think I agree, I think many of us have invested in some of these resources, providing them with the structures and the practice that instructors need to then get that student to a place where they can get more targeted assistance.
Thank you. And I want to thank all the presenters and panelists for being concise with their comments. I know that's sometimes a challenge when you have so many wonderful things in the works and you want to share so much. We do have so many questions. We did get a question or a reminder in our email that there's a lot of acronyms being used. And for some families, these acronyms are new. We are talking about SEL, which is social emotional learning. We do have a follow-up question on that, but I'm just going to ask panelists to try to spell out or clarify what those acronyms are when they're raised. So our next question is related to SEL, and a family member specifically asked, how are districts helping teachers to integrate authentic ways to be helpful and not just use canned programs that kids dismiss? And I think we're going to start with Bethany on that one.
Yeah, some of what I'm thinking for this answer kind of relates back to what everyone was discussing first. So it is so important for our teachers to build that strong relationship through a lot of these social and emotional learning lessons that are and discussions that are happening in the classroom. And so one thing that we worked really hard on this summer is developing a library of resources related to different lessons and activities that teachers can use to promote the 5 CASEL competencies. So that's one piece. And one thing that a lot of our schools are doing, which I really appreciate, is that they kind of do a needs assessment throughout the year to see what the students want to talk about and what they want to address. So whether it's an issue related to social justice or something that's happened in the news, some of those discussions can happen in the classroom, and it creates that safe space where the students feel really connected with their teachers, so that when there is something that comes up, a crisis in that child's life, they do feel comfortable approaching their teacher, and the teacher can then bridge them to the appropriate services.
Thank you, Bethany. And I just wanted to make a note that CASEL, which you mentioned, is a very well-respected organization, and CASEL stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, and it's very easy, CASEL.org if you're interested in learning more, but a lot of our social emotional content comes from there. Rendy, would you take that question?
Sure. And thank you for spelling out the acronym, because I had made a note to do that as well. So thank you. And I want to emphasize, as I'm sure all of us here feel like, what has brought this really to the forefront in a very public way is the pandemic. But this is work we've been working on for years, pre-pandemic. We had been working on, we had seen an uptick in mental health concerns in children pre-COVID. So while it's the urgency is greater now, the work has been, fortunately, already in place for several years. And so, in Arlington, for example, we've been doing youth mental health first aid training ourselves internally for years, and we continue to do that. We're offering it, for our new hires and pre-service week, and we'll continue to offer that. We had been working on trauma-sensitive school practices and teaching teachers about ways to allow students to identify and express themselves and to recognize when they come in, not feeling ready to learn just yet, and it's okay to give space and those kinds of things. So it's really, really expanding and continuing all of those things and integrating them, with work. We have this year, I think, in direct response to the question about how to help teachers integrate, we've done a curriculum crosswalk, which means that we looked last summer, we started looking at English language arts, for example, in elementary schools, and the standards. What are we teaching in English language arts, and where in the English language arts standards are there places for us to piggyback or add in this social and emotional learning. So for example, for second graders, there's a standard that talks about, being able to identify your self-characteristics, your feelings, your wants, your needs. Oh, that's so perfect to line up with the social and emotional learning competency of self-awareness. So we created some lessons for teachers to use, some resources, books you can read if you're reading anyway. Why not read this book, for example? So we're excited for the opportunities to continue to integrate all of those things together and maximize the effects of all the adults in the school. We believe that any adult in our schools can be the trusted adult. We've been surveying our students about can they identify a trusted adult in the school for several years, and we've made several, I want to say 100%, but as a psychologist, I know you never say 100% anything, right? So most of our school administrators have a school management plan goal around increasing that trusted adult relationship. And that's all of us. That's not just any one particular role. So we have a lot going on to help the teachers, and we are not relying on pre-planned program. We use a variety of resources. We adapt things, we create homemade things, but we try to use a good variety, and we do give our school spaces to look at their small school community and make decisions at that level. And it's not all just central office pushing down, this is what you need to do. Everybody needs to march in step. We want them to be empowered to really look at their students and their families and engage with their families around the work. So that's a little bit of what we have going on.
Thanks, Wendy. Rebecca Sharp.
You would think after 20 months, I would remember to unmute. That's one of those skills I haven't mastered yet. But we have a lot in place for our teachers as well. Again, as I said, we focused on approaching the pandemic and the return to school as, our students and staff coming back from a traumatic event. So we've spent time, all of our counselors are working at their schools to provide training to our staff on recognizing red flags for what does trauma look like, feel like, what it sound like in the classroom, so that teachers are able to recognize those red flags. Just as some of the other divisions on here have been doing, we are strong advocates for the youth mental health first aid course. So we're a small community. We've trained up close to 200 people, and we opened it up to parents as well, so that they're also, able to recognize when children are in crisis and know what to do and what not to do, because that's also very important. And then we have our work for our pre-service teachers. In fact, today I taught all of the pre-service teachers how to do relaxation and breathing exercises with the students in their classrooms. And I gave them 32 different ways you can help kids do breathing exercises in the classroom, from the Wonder Woman deep breathing to bubblegum deep breathing. So we did a little bubblegum deep breathing today, because I think all of our new teachers were a little anxious coming back to school. But and then the week after next, we have division level PD days, and we've created a conference style event this year rather than having more prescriptive trainings. And we're allowing, we have a strong mental health strand that teachers can go to. One of our sessions I'm really excited about is teacher talk, how to talk to children when they come back and they've experienced some of these things that they've experienced. We have a session on grieving because we have a lot of kids who are experiencing a lot of grief, and we have staff who are experiencing grief. And so it's those approaches really, we offer in-person training, we offer online training, whatever method our teachers need, then we really set out to provide that for them.
Thanks, Rebecca. So we did have a question come in about younger children. We know that there have been some children that have started their formal schooling during the pandemic. Can you explain what additional measures will be taken for first graders who miss the behavioral and emotional learning that is critical in kindergarten? I'm going to start with Daryl.
Sure. And it's really interesting when I saw that question, because it's a question I've been thinking a lot about since even fall and winter of last year, just sort of, how our first graders had a very different experience, or how our current first graders had a very different experience last year going into kindergarten. So a couple of thoughts from our perspective is that, regardless of whether our students came back to us in person in some form in our hybrid opportunities last year, and we did get a sizable number of those students, or if they remained in fully virtual education through the end of the last year, those PBIS reinforcements, those social, emotional, and behavioral lessons and SEAL time was all still consistent. Like, all the students received the same information, because when we went to hybrid, they were either sitting in the classroom or they were online, but they were all getting the same material from that instructor. So as much as we could, I think any of us in this room probably could, we front loaded what we were able to last year. So I would say that hopefully most of those students got something. Was it necessarily the same as they would have gotten in a normal kindergarten year? Probably not. So then this year, what that means for us going into this year is we have to think about those first graders that are coming in, that some aspects of how they're going to enter school they're going to need more explicit instruction again on what are expectations now that I'm in a school building, if it's the first time I've been in a school, as well as what are the routines? What do I need to learn in order to be able to build up my own efficacy, as well as be able to feel that sense of safety and comfort in knowing what's going to happen in the schools. I did presentations all afternoon to our new staff that are coming into our school buildings, and it was something that we talked quite a bit about, is that you're really going to have to extend the amount of time, not even just for our first graders, but across the board, to really reintegrate students into the concept of in-person schooling and really practice over and over those routines and really reinforce over and over and over again what those behavioral expectations are. Because regardless of whether you're a first grader that started kindergarten last year in a fully virtual environment, and this is the first time you're in a school building, or whether you're a 10th grader that hasn't been in a school building for 18 months, you're all going to have to relearn how to engage with each other socially, understand what those expectations might be, and figure out what's my new routine, what's my new normal. I mean, many of us have had to do that as we've transitioned back into the workplace, at some point over the last couple of years, and sort of reassessing, I got to get in my car, I got to get ready, I got to drop the kid off. It's no different for our students, and we need to give our students, and we will give our students, the grace and the time and the materials that they need to be able to learn that.
Jen, would you like to add?
I would. And Daryl, you took a lot of my talking points. So again, I think I agree with 100% what you said, that those first graders coming in have not had that experience in the classroom, and really will need a lot of practice and routine when it comes to what are the expectations? How do I interact with people? How do I communicate with people? How do I sit for this long? How do I walk in the hallways? Those things that we just think come naturally, they don't. So we, again, the PBIS, the SEL, all of that was implemented virtually, and those kindergartners figured out how to use their devices. It's not an ideal situation to forge a connection with a teacher, but the connections were made. So I think that that is something that is a strength that we did develop for those kindergartners. And then we just have to build upon that with all of those routines and continuing to implement them over and over and over again. And I was in an RP training this morning, and we were talking about how you can use circles and how you can't just do a circle once and then expect for things to change. You need to do a circle every morning with those kids and blend in the class expectations, have them recite the classroom expectations. What are the rules of a circle? And then also just have them forge connections with one another and their teacher to get that trust. So I think there's a lot that we're already doing and lots of things that we need to keep in mind as they do come in. They may be struggling. Many of the students that we have made connections with are already anticipating, the parents are anticipating anxiety and separation anxiety, which I think is a big thing. Students who had some of that brewing before the pandemic, but we all had trauma. So how we model it as adults might help or harm our students and our children at home. And it's scary. There's an actual risk to us. And what do you do with that? So some of those students might have separation anxiety, and we're ready to support them. We have a staff that's been trained with Dr. Dalton in a cohort. So we're getting evidence-based curriculum that we can use for groups if students have been identified at the elementary level. And then we also have counseling lessons that are going to be implemented in the classroom by the school counselors to help students have that conversation and normalize the conversation about feeling uneasy about being back. What does anxiety feel like? What does it look like? Where do you feel it in your body? Just helping them to open up so that we can identify students who might need additional supports.
Thanks, Jen. Shifting a little bit, we also had a question about older students. How can families help high-achieving high schoolers balance a social life and a demanding academic schedule? I know this is probably a concern all the time, but especially during the pandemic. And I'm going to start with Becca from Prince William.
Great, thank you so much. So great question from the parents out there. I think that, one thing when I work with parents, I always try to emphasize that it's very normal for us, I'm a parent too, to think about our own experience as an adolescent and try to match that experience with what we believe should be happening with our own teens and tweens. And I do think that's something as parents that we kind of have to let go of. So what struck me about this question was the part about, having that balance of social life. And I think that one thing that many parents are learning, it's different. How they connect with each other is very different than it was when some of us were younger. I'm really trying not to age myself as I answer this question. But I think it's important for us to understand that we have to recognize there are different ways of socializing and that the balance may even look different to us as parents. So for those high achieving students, I would say, especially with this past year, which I know was probably very stressful for many of our students who really thrive on routine and thrive on the interactions that they have with teachers, I would say that, helping students to understand that it's okay to have a lot of emotions around going back to school in person, especially if you're going, for your senior year and you missed half of your 10th and 11th grade year. It's okay to have a lot of feelings around that. It's okay to not have everything perfectly in order right away. I think we as adults have modeled that as we've been coming back into the workforce. I've had great difficulty just figuring out where to put things on my desk. This has been a traumatic experience for all of us. So just parents having patience with their teenagers and really helping them to understand that, we put a lot of things in perspective in the past year, I think. And I'm really hoping that that has rubbed off on some of our very high achieving teens who put more pressure on themselves than anyone is putting on them, and that we put things into perspective and realize that there are so many things that we have overcome, so many adversities that we have learned to deal with. That in itself is such a wonderful accomplishment, and we should be proud of that as well. So parents, just recognize that it looks different than it was for us, and that balance is so important, and we want them to have that social experience and know that that's a really important part of their education, as well as achieving academically.
Thanks. Rebecca, would you like to add?
Sure. I think another big piece is recognizing that we can't do it all. And in helping our students who are those extremely high achieving students understand that it's okay that right now we can't do it all. And we have to give them guidance and help them focus on what is it that is your priority, because you can't do it all. When you try and do it all, especially when we're dealing with some of the emotions that we're bringing back into school, it just adds to the anxiety. And then another piece is that it's also very critical for our staff to recognize in our high achieving students. A lot of times, those are the students that, they're doing okay. They've got good grades. They're on a sports team. They've got friends. They're doing okay, but they really aren't. And so we need to keep a weather eye out for them and look for those signals that are very subtle with those children. And I shouldn't call them children because they're young adults and students, but so I think that's really critical. And one of the things that, that we want to help folks understand is how to recognize what does anxiety look like. And so we are doing sessions for teachers on that and sessions for parents on that.
I would just like to add to a message to the parents is look at what you're modeling. How have you handled the stress of the pandemic? And have you shown vulnerability and been genuine about your struggles to some extent with your kids? Because if you've masked it and pretended that everything's fine, then they're going to have difficulty balancing that and being able to open up about that. Again, I'm not saying put all of your problems out on your child or your adolescent, but at least to say this is difficult and normalize that and validate that and model the behaviors you want them to demonstrate. Take care of yourself, exercise, make time for friends, make time for family, and balance that work responsibilities as best you can.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, that the self-regulation skills are skills that we can model and in both ways. And we have to remember that as parents and caregivers that we are being watched. So a number of families and a lot of our Northern Virginia Family Network members focus on individuals and who are raising children and young adults with disabilities and other special needs and mental health conditions. And so we did get a number of questions about students with disabilities and other special needs. So what supports are teachers being given in order to support all the children in their schools, especially those students with special needs? And I think we're going to begin with Becca from Prince William.
Thank you so much. So, again, I do think that you heard several of us talk about this when we did our introductions at the beginning, the extra supports that will be in place to support teachers so they in turn can support our students. I would say to the parents that, I can speak for Prince William County, but I think that my colleagues that are on the call will nod their heads. Great care is being taken with your students and assessing where they are at with their learning. A great deal of resources are being invested to ensure that we meet them where they are when they come in to start the school year, and that we are prepared to create an individual plan to get them to where they need to be. So if we're dealing with some unfinished learning, as we are calling it in Prince William County schools, okay, we are ready to find out what those areas are that you did not master and to get you where you need to go. If we have students that need to be accelerated, we're ready to look at that and to take those students to where they need to go. So please know that I think the attention being paid after this past year to assessing students' learning, especially those students who have IEPs, and to make sure that we have plans for those students to learn at the highest level possible and to remove barriers, which all of us have been talking about. We need to remove those social emotional barriers. One of my colleagues at the beginning said, social emotional learning is not one more thing on the plate, it's the plate. I say that all the time. It's what everything is built on. So I hope that you're hearing from all of us today that we really are putting a lot of thought and time and resources into making sure that we make this the best possible situation for your student and help them to thrive this school year.
Thank you, Becca. Jen, did you want to add anything to that question?
Again, I would echo what Becca says. I think we're looking at the academics, the social, emotional, and the behavioral, and meeting students where they are. And it's okay with where they are, and really just enhancing across Northern Virginia the training for our staff who are working with students, including students with disabilities. So trauma-informed lenses and mental health first aid. We're implementing Cognito, simulated trainings, which I think others are nodding their heads saying they are doing as well. So it's a simulated web-based interactive data program that you work through and figure out how to respond and interact with students. So I don't have anything else to add.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would just sort of also say that I think if families are concerned about that or students are concerned, I would say that most people fell behind in areas last year. I mean, again, I think we have to come back to sort of this collective traumatic experience that really impacted everyone in our schools in some way. So I think we need to, when we talk with kids and they're worried about, I'm behind, I didn't learn as much as my peers, I wasn't able to, do X, Y, or Z last year. I think what we found certainly in our conversations with schools as well as leadership team was that was actually more the norm, at least at some point during the year for some reason with our students, and oftentimes they would have to play catch up at places, or assignments might go missing because everyone experienced the pandemic, sort of the physicalness of the pandemic, but also just the emotional loss and the ebbs and flows that came with that along the way. So I almost feel like this is something that we're going to address again through those daily opportunities and the integration of social, emotional, and academic learning into our every aspect of our school. I think we're going to try to address that because it's not just a need for some kids, even though some kids may feel like it's only them. It's really a need for all of our kids. We've all got to play some catch up, whether that's academic or whether that's socially and emotionally from the events of the last 18 months.
I just want to chime in with one thing too. I was speaking with a teacher recently who said, this is what we do. We've always met kids where they are. That's our job, and that's where we excel. And teachers are going into this school year prepared to meet students where they are. They're not looking at it as learning loss. They're looking at it as, these are my kids. I'm going to assess and I'm going to make sure that I'm giving each student what they need. So I just really, that rang very loudly for me. I think that's a really good message. And I think it's important for parents to keep that in mind too. That's what teachers are here to do.
I wanted to add a little bit more about specifically for our students with disabilities, because I do think that they are a group that we all recognize experienced probably some of the most difficulty engaging virtually. And, it's very hard to provide physical therapy support virtually, that's just the reality of it. And so as we reopened last year, our IEP teams were critical for our kids with disabilities. And so we're encouraging, if the IEP team needs to come together and we need to, add a related service of counseling for that student, then we need to do that. We shouldn't hesitate. And, we have that access to lots and lots of data to help support that, then that needs to happen. That's the purpose of the IEP, is to make sure that we have in place what that student needs in order to access the curriculum. The other piece is you started the question out with, what are we doing for teachers to help them support our students with disabilities? One of the things that I'm doing with the staff on my team is those first few days of school, they are deployed in classrooms. We're not sitting in offices. Our social workers, our psychologists, our counselors, our behavior specialists, they are all in classrooms. We are all hands on deck, supporting teachers and supporting kids.
Thank you. And I appreciate, since so many of our Northern Virginia Family Network members are disability linked organizations, it's just a reminder that all of our organizations are there for families who are raising kids with special needs. So if you are feeling as a parent or caregiver frustrated or concerned about that reentry and perhaps what's being perceived as falling behind, there are options. And I'm sure all of our groups, individual groups, would be glad to support you family to family. Becca, did you want to add anything else before we move on to the next question? Because I know you might have had a comment about the anxiety of falling behind.
Yes, I know that there was a question about, the anxiety that students on IEPs may have due to falling behind during online schooling. We know as educators, and again, I think my colleagues all on this call will agree with me, that online schooling was not great for everyone. We are fully aware that for many of our students with disabilities, it was not the most positive experience for them. And so again, as students are coming back in, I just want the parents to know that we are going to take great care with really trying to undo some of the things or some of the feelings that students may have about their experiences when they were in online schooling. Again, I'm not just here as an educator, I'm here as a parent. I'm a parent of a kid who hated online schooling, a high school student. So I watched that, and I watched that the impact that it had on my child's self-esteem, and I see how important it is, those moments that he's building that back up and how his anxiety decreases. So I would say to the parents, look for those opportunities to really focus on some of the positives as your student enters this school year, and focusing on the things that maybe that did go well. I will tell you, even our students who did not have great experiences, if they look at what they can do now with a computer, with navigating around a system like the learning management systems that we have, with just document formats, PDFs, Word documents. Again, kids did know some of this, but our kids are masters at this now. And I think that we need to, as parents, just point that out, like, look how far you've come. Look how much you were able to do when you did the online learning. No, maybe you didn't get an A on every math assignment, but you really mastered how to upload a document. And I think our kids can teach all of us things about some of that. So parents, please, try to focus on the positive when those students are anxious, and let's look for those little wins as they're going back to school to really point out things that are good and that they have really excelled or achieved.
Great perspective. This next one is specific to Fairfax County. So Bethany gets this question. We had a parent ask, is the personal development class that teaches coping skills and focuses on mental wellness still offered for students in the special education program? And if so, does FCPS have any plans to offer or require FCPS students to take a class like personal development that teaches coping skills and supports mental wellness?
Yeah, and so thank you for that question. So just so the other viewers know, personal development is a class that is offered for our students who have special education needs. It's an elective class for students in grades 7 through 12, and it does focus on coping skills and different social emotional skills. It is typically offered to students who have IEPs with goals in the area of social or emotional learning. And so it is not offered to all students in FCPS at this time. We are covering that through what we had talked about, advisory class, which is for middle school and high school students. That is that block built into the day for everyone. And then through kind of the morning meeting set up at the elementary level. If you're looking for anything to further kind of coping skills and supporting wellness, one of my favorite programs that we partner with is Our Minds Matter, and it is a student-led organization that we have in nearly every high school, and it is rolling out, we're rolling out a pilot to more schools at the middle school level next year. The students focus on learning about mental health, how to take care of ourselves, how to seek help, learning different coping skills, and then promoting wellness and trying to reduce the stigma associated with mental health throughout the school. So if your child is in middle or high school, I would encourage them to inquire about that, because it's a great group for students to be involved in.
Thanks, Bethany. I have a question about parent volunteers. We have somebody who mentioned that in the past, parent volunteers have done virtual book reviews of interest on things such as Why We Sleep in conjunction with the principal, social worker, and psychologist. Will parent volunteers be able to host events this year that pertain to supporting students, parents, and school staff in the buildings, and even extending that further? Are the buildings allowing guests to come in to offer programs that support students, parents, and school staff? Wendy, would you like to take this one?
I'll be happy to start it off. And so I want to celebrate some of our own skills, as I think Bethany was talking about, or maybe Becca, and how much we have learned as professionals to provide opportunities virtually. And throughout the pandemic, we really benefited from being able to offer parent education or parent support opportunities virtually, and saw just a tremendous increase in our participation and attendance, which was very exciting and encouraging. We also found that we were able to offer events at more flexible times. So it's easy for our school staff to offer a lunch opportunity for parents, or before school or after school virtually. It was so much simpler. And we intend to keep all of that going. It also allowed us to be much more flexible with translation, interpretation services, and things like that. So it felt like it was much more accessible to our whole community than our past efforts have been. So we're delighted by that. We really also expanded our collaboration with our County Council of PTAs, our Department of Human Services. We did more joint presentations and panels like this. And so we will continue to do that. But yes, of course, we would love to have opportunities to have some experiences in person as well. So we will explore those. I can't say tonight exactly what they will look like. Specifically, we have a lot of mandates on us about who's coming into buildings and all of that. But we will very much welcome, and we do value the fact that many of our parents have been learning with us. They've been learning new skills as parents and new things that really other parents benefit from sharing with them. So yes, we will in Arlington, and I'm sure all of our neighbors, we're looking forward to those occasions.
Thank you very much. And we're with you on those collaborative opportunities. It's so valuable, and you raise a really good point, Wendy, that we, when those silver linings might be just finding new ways to reach we've seen number of parents in more equitable ways. So that's fabulous news. And we continue to seek that collaborative learning because it is valuable for everyone involved. The next question talks, there was some mention of this when you did your introductions about the recognition that not only students have been through this last year and a half of challenges, but also our staff and fellow educators. So can you talk a little bit about how you're addressing the mental health needs of your staff and your educators? And I think we'll start with Jen on that one.
Yes, so I think we've already said this over and over again. We all experienced some sort of trauma in the last 20 months. And we recognize that the people that are taking care of our children have had their own struggles. And what we wanted to do was really make sure that they had an opportunity to share their voice. So when we first were hit with the pandemic, a lot of the staff were really struggling with not being able to say goodbye to their students and doing everything virtually and planning for that. So we did do some virtual responsive circles for staff. And it was really neat to see because we'd have a teacher from the Sterling area and a teacher from Percival who would come together and have a very similar experience in a virtual world. And they wouldn't necessarily ever have connected. So it provided a sense of hope for folks to be able to voice what they were feeling and recognize that they weren't alone with that, and that they could use this as a resource to get through. But since then, we've evolved and we've offered those a couple times. And then when we went to the hybrid model, we did those in person upon the principal's request. And our EAP has really, really stepped up, and we've enhanced our amount of sessions. So we've gone from 3 to 6. And then we're also offering from Health and Wellness a virtual support group that's every week that anyone can tap into. And we have our newsletter that comes out through our wellness office. So there's Mindful Mondays, and there's lots of other tools that are shared that are really great little videos with yoga and mindfulness, so that every single staff member receives.
Thank you. Love to hear that. Becca from Prince William.
Great, thank you. So, again, as Jen said, a lot of us talked about this in our opening. I would say in Prince William County Schools, what we're doing is we're paying attention. We're paying attention to the mental health needs of our staff. We too have an excellent EAP program, which is an employee assistance program. For the parents out there, many of your businesses would have that as well, where as a benefit of your employment, you can get assistance, and that can be for a variety of topics, but that does include mental health. So our partnership with our benefits team and what we can do for educators through that program is really important. The other thing that we're doing and kind of under the same umbrella of paying attention is really making sure that we are purposeful in putting resources out to all staff members. Not just our teachers. I think that sometimes we have to remember about people like the bus drivers who are always the first ones to see the students in the morning, and who were the first ones when we were all very scared and brought students back into the building to pick those students up. Our custodians who never stopped working ever during the entire time that we were closing schools. They were still in there having to open them. So we're really paying attention to all our groups of employees and being intentional about giving them some resources, whether it be connecting them directly with the Employee Assistance Program. The Virginia Department of Education has done a good job at putting some wellness resources together for staff members. We're sharing those resources, even going as far as having an Ask a Counselor email address where staff members can just reach out and get someone in the Office of Student Services who can, if we don't have the answer, we're going to connect them with someone who does have the answer. So just to the parents out there, anything that you can do to help all of our school system employees know how appreciated they are, that goes a very long way into helping them be well and mentally healthy.
Thank you. And I think, Bethany, you had some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of touched on EAP. We do have that as a very strong resource. And this year, our Wellness Hub has really expanded to include a lot of virtual fitness classes and cooking classes and different things, because we know our physical health is so closely tied to our mental health. One thing, sometimes you may hear about EAP and it doesn't apply to you in that moment, but at the start of the school year in every school building, our counselors, social worker, and psychologists are doing, we're calling it Refresh and Remind. And at the very start of that session, it's reminding educators of all of the wellness resources and EAP and all the resources they have to support them. And then the presentation also rolls into, we take care of ourselves and then we can take care of youth. And it talks about how to notice signs and symptoms of mental health concerns or potential trauma exposure for students. So we tie the two together and make sure that we're sharing those throughout the year.
I just wanted to, excuse me, I just wanted to add a couple of other things that we're doing. We're doing very similar things that everybody has said. We are, as part of our PD strands, we are also offering self-care for teachers. So that teachers can come to a session that is targeted at helping them build their own self-care strategies, which is built on that premise of you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can help someone else. Another piece I think that has helped with staff is transparency in data. I think we all have to, it's really important to recognize that we still have active COVID transmissions in all of our communities, at one level or another. And then, when you combine that with the new variants that continue to come out and the constant barrage of information that is there. And information is great. It's educational. It keeps us all aware, but sometimes it's really hard for folks to synthesize that and to step away from it. So one of the things that we're trying to be really cognizant of is helping folks understand that schools are safe. And, yes, we're going to have cases, but we have structures in place to help minimize the impact of that. And it was really important today, just like Daryl, I spent my entire day with our new teachers and our new staff, and I did a session this morning. These are people who have just committed to come and be employees in our school division. And I wanted them to understand that they are coming to a safe place. And so when you talk about what are the things that you're doing for teachers, I think sharing data, being honest about, the mitigation strategies, and that you are coming to a safe place to work.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think it's a really important point. So thinking about COVID, I know there's a lot of excitement that students are returning 5 days a week in the classroom. For students who might be having anxiety or other mental health concerns, first of all, is there an option to remain virtual? And if so, what kind of documentation is needed for those students? I'm going to start with Wendy.
Okay, thank you. That's an excellent question. So in Arlington, we are, first of all, just starting with choice. Parents can simply choose virtual and they don't need to give a reason. They can select that or select in person. And then for our school division, the opportunities to change your mind from one to the other, are structured and scheduled, as I'm sure they are in all of the neighbors, because we all have the responsibility of planning and staffing for all of the instructional programs. So, which is not a simple process. So for us in Arlington, parents are making choices. They've made choices. If they want to switch from virtual to in-person, they can do that at any time. That's an easier direction for just making their choice. But to go from in-person to virtual, they have opportunities. So for our elementary students, they can request that at every quarter. And for our secondary students, they can request that at the mid-year. And again, they can just make that request. For students who have been identified as IEP or special education students, or their students with disabilities under Section 504, there is, of course, more flexibility there. They have more options about that, but that would involve like an individual conversation, because you want to look at needs as a whole and you want to respond. It's not just an all or nothing decision. We want to be really careful and thoughtful. So they would go through their review processes to do that. But we're really working hard to work with families to be responsive and find ways that are best for students, and no matter what situation that they're in.
Thanks, Wendy. Did anyone else want to add a different approach?
I would love to add, just because of the mental health complexities and the anxiety piece, typically how students respond to that, or even adults respond to anxiety, is our tendency is to avoid. So that is my biggest fear, and I think many other colleagues would agree that necessarily will not solve the problem. So if they're choosing to stay in virtual because of the unknowns that we have, then that might actually be very counterintuitive. But I know as parents, our natural gut instinct when our children are in discomfort, visibly, physically, or emotionally, we want to protect and we want to stop it. And avoidance actually stops it, but it will make it a lot harder to treat the anxiety in the long run. So we really want, if you are considering any sort of virtual option, our window has closed, but some were because of mental health. We want to have that conversation, really look at what other options we have. Could we do a reduced day? Could we get them in the building one day just so that we could start transitioning them back, because we don't want them to be virtual for a whole nother year, because we're worried about what that might do in the long run with the anxiety and other mental health issues and their social skills that might deteriorate.
I was going to add, just real quick to echo what Jen said. I could not agree more about most of us are mental health practitioners in our background. And I think it's really important for parents to critically analyze requests that their teens are making. Here's what we know about adolescents, especially our tweens and our teens. They are social creatures, and their socialization and peer relationships, as much as we don't like it as parents, the peers become the most important thing for a developing child when they are in the middle and high school years. And so I think that's why, again, in Prince William County, our window has closed. However, we do have processes for students that have medical issues, but we really want to implore our parents to think about where their child is at developmentally and how can we best support them to get back in the school building so they can have those social experiences that we know are so important to their development.
And just to chime in, similarly, our window has closed as well for a limited virtual programming option. But we really do encourage families who have concerns about coming in person because of health or medical needs to reach out to your base school. If you reach out to the base school, we have a team that can support you and coming up with options that are best for your child.
I just wanted to add that in Falls Church, we are small. Well, our data was a little different, I think, than some of our neighbors. When we returned, we had a 98% return rate. So we had a very small number of families actually choose virtual. They wanted in-person instruction. And so as we move into the 21-22 school year, we are not offering a virtual option for our preschool and our elementary students. At the secondary level, we have always had hybrid courses in place. And so those will still continue to be available if students want to interact with those hybrid courses. We've also always used Virginia Virtual because we are a smaller community. We've always accessed some of those resources. Those resources will continue to be available, but we really are focusing on in-person instruction unless there really is a true mental health need or a physical health need or a disability-based need. And if it's a disability-based need, it goes to the 504 team or to the IEP team. If it is, a health need, a physical health need, then, we have medical homebound options that we will look at for those students. But we are focusing our efforts on in-person instruction.
Carol, I think you might be the only do you want to just clarify what any documentation requirements before we move on to the next question quickly?
Sure. Well, much like several of the others on here, we are very focused on our in-person return for students. And we did have an opportunity through even mid-July for families to elect a virtual option, and that window has now closed.
Thank you. So our next question actually looks at this issue of virtual versus in person a little bit differently, rather than it being a choice issue. But if a number of families indicated some concern about this, as of the last week or so, the rapidly increasing Delta variant rates. And so one parent asked, how do we plan for back to in-school learning with the possibility of returning to virtual learning depending on the virus track? So I think that sort of that unknown aspect. How can families best support their child? So actually, Daryl, I'll go to you next on that.
Sure. So, I know that people are concerned about sort of the fluctuation that may occur in terms of where we might be. I think the state has given a pretty strong mandate that we need to be providing in-person opportunities for any student that wishes to have them. And as I hope people have heard from this group tonight, we're very committed to providing a safe and supportive in-person environment for our students for so many reasons that we've discussed. So I know that people may be fearful of what may happen as we go through, but I mean, as of this point in time, I think we're all, we're going to continue to see this through. We have more knowledge now this year than we did last year. We know some of the things that we can do for mitigating measures, whether that's the use of face masks, whether that's the, hand washing, whether that's distancing. I mean, we have all of these things that schools can put in place to keep things safer. Certainly, and I'm a parent as well, and something that's in the back of my mind, with my son who is back, in a school environment is, also maintaining some level of an ability to think about being flexible, if something should happen. Like, for instance, I'll use myself as the example, like if for some reason he needs to quarantine, I need to sort of have a backup plan to be able to think about, well, how are we going to, work that out between jobs and him and care. So I do think it's important for families to think about, if I temporarily, even if it, just think about it from a temporary basis, if I temporarily needed to sort of be able to stay, support my kid at home for some reason, how might I go about that? Who could I call? What's my support system? And if there's real concern about what that support system might be, that's where I think you connect with the professionals in your school building to say, hi, I'm a little worried. Do you have a connection to a resource? Do you have any ideas? Just in case I needed to have a backup plan. I think that most of our divisions, those school-based teams would be happy to support at least a conversation and help somebody think through what that might be. But I want to reiterate, our goal is in-person instruction 5 days a week, and to really maintain that to the highest extent possible, particularly through following some of those mitigating measures that our school divisions have at the forefront to choose from.
Thank you. I think we have another question that we've just received in from one of our live audience members. So I'm going to give folks a chance to respond to this. And then we're moving to our last sort of wrap-up question. So we recognize that we committed to an hour-and-a-half session and really appreciate everyone's time and stick to it with our panel tonight. The question speaks to how are you and your divisions working with your community services board or your community services office and other mental health providers, sort of community-based folks, to prepare to meet the mental health needs. And I know in your introduction, there was some mention of some efforts with Healthy Minds Fairfax, for example, but are there other things that you want to mention? I'm just going to do round robin and start with Wendy.
Okay. We are working very closely with our community services board, especially the Children's Behavioral Health Division, and communicating. Actually, I meet with the bureau chief every other week, and we talk about where they're at in providing services and where we are in providing services. And as always, we are having them do introductions of their current service array and how to access it as a part of our pre-service to all of our mental health folks. I really am very pleased. They have been extraordinarily responsive and supportive of us in schools. making therapists available, being available to consult with parents, helping us think through things. It's been another silver lining, as you referenced earlier, to the pandemic, as we have really expanded our collaboration with our community service board, Children's Health Bureau. So I'm not sure if that 100% answered the question. I had not been thinking about that one in advance, so I
Yeah,
confess
I know
to
it
being-
was a curveball, but actually, I saw Becca from Prince William nodding. Do you have anything to add? And then anybody else can just raise their hands. We don't have to go fully round robin. But Becca, do you want to comment on that?
Ditto, yeah, to what Wendy was sharing. I do think the pandemic and really strengthened relationships that we have with our local community partners. I think that is, kind of a silver lining in some of these areas. So parents can know that we really are collaborating with each other to try to meet the needs of all community members. So we have always had a good relationship with our community services board. We do have community services board counselors in all of our high schools that are there to support our students and are a great resource to make connections to other outside services, sometimes cut through some of the red tape of that. We also have in my office, I am proud to be able to oversee our school social workers, who are also very well versed at making those connections with community partners when there is a need for that. Some of the most creative problem solvers I've ever seen in education are people like school social workers, school psychologists, who really just try to find ways to best support the family. So, and we are thinking outside the box about, well, what do future partnerships look like? I think, again, the past 20 months have taught us a lot, and it's taught us that we all do need each other and we need to rely on each other. So I think parents can expect more partnerships in the area of, liaisoning with mental health organizations to be able to quickly get services to students who need them.
Thank you. So I think Megan's going to pose our last question. If you want to comment in your wrap up on any community connections, then you can do that. But I do want to honor our time. So Megan, do you want to pose that last question?
Yeah, so again, sorry to anyone whose questions we did not get to. We had so many that came in, but I do want to just leave everyone get a chance to wrap up with this. So with all the considerations related to our current circumstances, the hybrid and virtual learning of last year, the need for masks once we return in the fall, the social and technological challenges that we continue to face, and more, what final recommendation can you leave families as they work to partner with educators to prioritize mental health and wellness for each student? And I'm actually going to start with Bethany.
Yeah, and I will try to keep this brief, but I think anything that our families can do to continue to build safety and trust in their children when it comes to school, but also at home, and really building off of the strengths in your child, but also within your family, and being able to focus on some of those strengths. And lastly, just really communicating with your teacher and the mental health clinicians in your school buildings as concerns arise. There's a whole team to support you and your child. So reach out at any point.
Thank you, Bethany. Daryl, you're next on my screen.
Sure, I'm gonna steal something from a team member, Mr. Gregory Baldwin, who is our restorative practices coordinator, and it's become sort of a mantra with us in student services and equity in our department, which is connection before content. I would absolutely, challenge families and school staffs and school leaders and students to think about let's go into this school year prioritizing building relationships and making connections and establishing those senses of psychological safety, so that then I am available to learn and available to learn fully. Because without those connections really, and giving the time that everybody needs to build those relationships and establish those bonds and routines, we need that before we're going to be able to start to look, I think, at some of the academic challenges that may occur. And we'll meet those academic challenges if we have taken care of people's health and wellness first.
Thanks. Becca from Prince William, you're next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, what I would say in closing to the parents who are really kind of looking at everything and wanting to partner with the educators is let's all give each other some grace. I think that everyone is stretched in a lot of different directions. Parents, educators, teachers, school nurses, bus drivers, principals. We're all just being stretched in all these different directions. And I think that if we could always assume positive intent in all of our interactions with each other, it will really go a long way. Because I can just speak as an educator. I want nothing for the best for every student in my school system and all these other Northern Virginia school systems. We're in this because we're crazy about kids. We love them. So, please give us some grace, assume that we are always positive in all our interactions with parents and with students, and it's always coming from our hearts that we want to do the right thing.
Thanks, Becca. Jen, you're next.
I couldn't agree more with what everyone has already said. The only thing that I would ask of parents is that they communicate with us, that when they see something might be off with their child, that they tell us sooner rather than later so that we can put appropriate supports in place. We don't want any parents to feel alone, and you have a whole team of staff, from teachers to mental health staff to administrators, who care so much about your child. So please keep us in the loop about what you're seeing at home. And if you have any concerns, please reach out.
Thanks, Jen. Wendy?
I couldn't agree more with everything that has already said. I was going to say some of the, assume positive intent and the grace and bloom, Maslow before bloom, which means we need to take care of our basic needs and encourage and support each other in doing so. Like I think someone referenced earlier, modeling. So all of us as adults have the opportunity to model that if we need to take a break, it's okay. If we make a mistake, we can recover. If we observe someone else make a mistake, we can offer them the opportunity and the space to recover. So all of those things I think are important. And then just as Jan just said, we are here for you. We are here for you. We want to hear from you, and we want to work together with you to support your student, your child, our student. And this is really, really coming from our hearts as educators, but also just as fellow human beings. Like, we all are in this and we want to work with you. So there is no concern that's too small. There's no question that's unworthy of being asked, and there's nobody that's not willing to help you. Just let us know. And we, on our side, we will be watching and looking for you and your students, and recognizing your needs and doing our best to help you through whatever situation we're all in together. So.
And last but not least, Rebecca.
Well, when you go last, I think they've taken everything that I was going to say. The last thing that I would offer, I have two things that I would offer. Keep perspective. That 6th grade math test, you're not going to remember that in a year. So let's keep perspective on what it really is most important. And it's building those relationships, and let's not make mountains out of molehills. We have enough mountains that we've had to climb. The other piece is to recognize that we may have all been in the same storm. We haven't all been on the same ship. All of our ships are very different, and we've all had different experiences. So when we say give grace and, give space, that means, that runs both ways, and respect each other's boundaries. Teachers have, lives too, and they need to be able to be with their families, and they want to be responsive to parents. And that's probably an innate need that we all have as educators. We went into this because we care, and we want, we do want the best, but, we have to also be respectful of, the boundaries. And let's not be keyboard warriors. Pick up that phone, to have a real conversation, a real relationship, rather than those big long emails that tend to, I think, cause their relationships to deteriorate. So I would offer those, the perspective and boundaries.
Thanks, Rebecca. I just want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists for coming on today, but also for all the amazing work that you do with students and families. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone who attended. I know we didn't get to all the questions. Feel free to contact us if you have questions, pressing questions that you'd like us to connect with our panelists to get answered for you, or if you'd just like to connect with the Northern Virginia Family Network, our email is nvfnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining, and we hope you all have a great night.